Today I'm going to show you my body parts. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Episode 3 of Road to the Rockies. Working on our Class 1 solely this episode. I haven't touched anything on Class 2 or Class 3, but I've been busy with the main project, the main focus of this entire series, and that is the Class 911, Class 1 911, whatever you want to call it. We'll figure it out as we get there. But I did get some actual work done. It's been a busy couple of weeks since you saw me last, but I think we have got some decent things to show from it. In one of the Friday Night Live feeds, I actually put together some of the drivetrain components in front of me here. This is the rear F10 portal axle. Also got the Vanquish Class 1 Falcon tires on there. These are the Wild Peak RT 419 Class 1 tire. So looking forward to running these. I also built some 310 wheels with a set of gold IFRs and some gold hardware. I felt like the 6-spoke style of the 310 is a fitting wheel for the Porsche. Now, like I said, I've got the rear axle here, and the front axle we've got built here. I don't have the wheels installed on it yet, and that's for a good reason. But this is a stock F10 front portal with the brass outer covers. Now, these brass outer covers add a nice amount of weight on the front of these axles, but when running these, it does require you to run a 350 hub or larger to be able to clear a regular set of wheels. But I'm going to keep this as narrow as possible. So what I am going to do is I am going to pull these covers off, and I'm actually going to mill them down a little bit on the face, reduce some of that so that I can run the narrowest offset that I can on the 1.9 Vanquish 310 wheels. And depending on how things go, I may even get a little crazier if I want to try and just experiment with bringing those in a little bit further yet. But that's on the to-do list. I haven't done any of that design work yet, and hopefully find time to accomplish that. But beyond that, this was just, I wanted to get the axles built, get them ready, set them aside for now so that they were ready once we were able to start bolting together some chassis stuff. Now, I haven't started on any of the chassis design work because I've been busy trying to get the first of the carbon fiber parts done. So fender mold is been coated in wax. I let that set up and dry. I've used the Carnauba wax before, or regular turtle wax, but I've never let it dry and set up on the mold. So I'm going to try that this time. I also wax between like the rigid, I waxed it apart and then put it back together. So hopefully it helps from resin getting where it's not supposed to, or at least separating more easily if and when it does. So I did reprint the hood mold last night again. Well, it's actually the third time. Matt showed you his print first. This is the mold that Matt used, basically. So the problem is that it's a long draft, or a long pull up after it's all done. So it makes it a lot more difficult to get that out of there. So I took and just carved the side of the mold out in CAD and then reprinted last night. So hopefully that makes it a lot easier. I'm still going to use the silicone buck that I used and poured from this one. I used an insert when I actually poured it to make so that there was less silicone needed. Thinned it out pretty well. You can see there that there's a decent amount of silicone around the outside still. I just submerged this piece, or it was one like it. I actually had to destroy it, removing it, in the mold originally when I casted the silicone, which was a mess because I had to get it pushed down in there and it wanted to float up, so I had to use weight and get it held down, but turned out all right, and we end up with this. Now when I 3D printed this piece here, I print it with no bottom layer, and then this is 3% infill, so it gives you these big wide spacings. And before we take and use this, I'm going to backfill this with plaster of Paris, so it'll give me a super rigid print that I can put all kinds of force onto, and it'll transfer to that silicone. So that's the plan. I've got to go backfill this, but before that I'm going to wax the hood mold up so that it gets time to dry. I'm going to load the fender first, and then we'll do the hood, but I'm going to try to get both of those done today. So that's the plan. I've got the mold ready like we discussed. I've got my silicone buck here for the fender. headlight area, top of the fender. This will be the wheel opening that gets cut out. I did relief cut the bottom side of this where there won't be any, finished part down here. So I did that, and I actually took like a 3/16 of an inch off the bottom. That's just to hopefully be able to get this into this mold easier. I expect to struggle with that a bit, so a little concerned there, and I hope that works, and I hope that it doesn't cause any loss of pressure in a way that affects my finished part elsewhere, but we'll see. This mold is pretty difficult because the fender, how it sits in there like this portion of the mold is undercut, so it's underneath of there. I'm hoping that my fabric I can kind of keep up and then push in to get it all pressed in there properly. I have pre-cut, pre-trimmed my fabric here, so I have a couple relief cuts in 3 places total, and I'll take off the tape before it goes in there. I will be using the chopped toe carbon here. This is that like flaky carbon. That's what I'll be loading the mold with first, and then this is just my backer fabric, so to help kind of give it a binding agent and something that will hold everything together. I've got my resin ready. We're going to pre-mix that, then I'll take and I'll put on a nice heavy coat of resin in the mold first before we put any of the chopped toe in, and then I'll continue to wet the toe down with more resin, put the fabric in, more resin. There'll be an excess of resin in here. That's the point with this type of molding, with the compression of this, is that extra resin, it just forces its way out where it's not needed. So we're going to mix this up. This is a 100 parts resin to 100 parts resin to 30 parts hardener, and it's a mix ratio by weight. So I've got the scale here. I'm going to start measuring that out. I'll figure out what 100 grams of resin looks like, see if I need to do 200 grams, and then I'll add 60 grams of hardener to that, as we go. That's 57 grams. So let's start with doing 100 grams of resin, 30 grams of hardener, and then we'll get it mixed up real nice. Make sure we have a nice heavy coat anywhere there's a finished part. I'm not as worried about the areas where there's not a finished part. I'm also not worried about extra. Okay. Make sure that it's good. The chopped toe will be the bulk of our thickness of our part, so we need to make sure that we have enough of it, since I'm only doing one layer of carbon matte. If you watched any of the Class 1 build last year, you'll see that the chopped toe gives a very different type of appearance to regular carbon. And I really like that. And it also allows me to not have to worry about the fact that the stranded look of the carbon may get disturbed when doing, this kind of, hobbyist engineering level carbon fiber work. If we were doing vacuum bagging and all that, this whole process would be much different, but making the molds and getting everything done properly would be much different as well. So this is a way that really you can easily do. You can do it without any tools. This method is super interesting to me, and I hope to find a way to make it just easily doable so that these projects aren't so overwhelming. I'm just wetting the mat, or wetting the chopped toe, getting it to a place that it's staying together and I can keep it pressed in. I didn't weigh out a certain amount of chopped toe or anything, like when I'm doing the pressed carbon mold the normal way. This is a different route completely. It's still, forged in the terms of it being, done under pressure, but not done in the way that I did forged on some of the parts last year. We're gonna do this in 2 steps. I'm gonna wet down this layer. I'm gonna add 1 more round of chopped toe up in the corner, like this back corner, which would be back by the door. I just want to make sure that there's plenty up there. That's my, like, it's kind of a sharp corner. That and the headlight area, that undercut. Those are the 2 areas that I'm most concerned about. So we're going to force a bunch up there. I'm going to put a bunch up in that area. I need to have enough to make sure that if it gets sucked down into when I force that other portion of the mold in, that there's enough there. I think we're doing good, but the tough part is still to come. It's all an experiment at this point. I need to get this tape off of this carbon. Okay, that it wasn't as bad as I thought. I'm leaving some of that mat up high so that it sucks down into the mold. And just wetting the mat out in general. I'm not worried about the mat on this side, because there's hardly any finished part down there. It's mainly just the wheel area. Lots of extra resin in there, it's okay. All right, here's the tough part. Here's the part I'm worried about, at least. I think trimming that excess off was the move. I think that did it. There we go. I think we're in place. Oh, we are. It's working, it's working, it's working. Okay. We're in there. I 3D printed a pressure plate that we're going to put on top. Got a block of aluminum that goes on top of that. Now we're going to take all of this out to the garage. I'm going to clamp it down. Shit, maybe I wasn't recording. It was? Oh, good. Time to do the hood now. So again, this mold is prepped. The silicone with the 3D printed buck is backfilled. I went and bought more clamps at Harbor Freight. So we're going to load up our mold here. This one I just backed with some Super 77, which is something I've seen people say kind of holds the weave together. Same method as before. I buy my brushes in bulk, so get any loose bristles pulled out by hand. Initial first thick coat. Now this mold surface, pretty much everything is finished part, at least for the flat portion. We're going to need considerably more chop than what I pulled. It's okay. I'm starting on the high side since it will want to run down naturally. Just getting it to wet through all the layers is the fun part. Making sure that I feel like it's to the edge enough. I feel like I got it better on one side than the other. All right, next project on the list is retrofitting my Stepcraft D600 with a proper dust collection setup. At this point, I'd just been doing it with a regular shop vac and the nozzle placed close to the spindle there. But I purchased a Stepcraft setup that gives me a proper boot setup. This kind of goes around here, and the shop vac will go on there. But to put it on, I have to kind of disassemble this bottom plate and the top plate, and there's a rail system that goes on there so that this can actually follow the workpiece when this goes up and down. So that's what we got. It's not too bad as far as in-depth goes, but I do have to disassemble a decent amount of it, so that's where I'm at. Next one. So the other night we put on the new dust collector on the Stepcraft here, and that thing's working out pretty well already. I've already cut some stuff on the table, and it was nice to have that setup be much more easy to just walk away from. Tonight I did put up a shelf and put the shop vac up there, and then actually routed the vacuum hose as well, and put a bungee on the top there so that it can follow it around and not ever be in the way. Just another simple little thing to make this a little bit easier to run without having to worry about the little details. I need to do some organizing and things like that, but this was just one thing about this whole setup that was a bit of a pain. So glad to have that checked off the box. But now onto the first finished parts out of the molds. This is our front fender and hood. And these may be underwhelming to a lot of you, but they're a big step for me. For one, just taking a model that was just surfaces and turning it into something that I could create solids and then create molds from, design the molds, which I am an absolute newbie at, and be able to come up with something that is a truly carbon fiber body panel. I'm pretty excited about it and pretty proud of it at that. Parts are out of the mold and I've done a rough trim. Beyond that, I've only washed them to get the mold release wax off, but we've got our front fender there, which was my biggest concern. This was it looks simple, and it probably is to experienced people, but it was a pretty difficult mold. Our hood here. So again, these you can still see the 3D printed finish to the molds on there. They're still wet, but now the next step is to do a bunch of wet sanding. I'll do a rough wet sand with some 320, then I'll go to some 600. These will get a clear coat when they're done, but it'll take it from this very dull finish to something that looks much more presentable. I've got a lot of sanding to do. It's already 11:30 at night, but I'm gonna see if I can get at least one of these two done tonight. All right, front fender sanded to that forged carbon look. A kind of like a seam right through there, runs it and then down, and that's actually just kind of where the actual parting seams of the mold were, and I think that the fibers just kind of get concentrated and packed in there. So even though this is smooth, like perfectly smooth, it's just the fibers oriented through there, and it just is how it is. And we got pretty good finish on everything. Looks like I got a little bit of a rough spot there still, so that area is gonna need some more attention, but that front contour all looks pretty good. Matches pretty well as far as the contours and everything. Now, the forged carbon look, or the chopped carbon fiber look, however you want to refer to it, is not for everybody. It is very different. And when it comes out of the molds, it's this finish over here, which is rough. And if you listen, that's actually the layer lines of the 3D printing coming through to the part. This side over here is the result of a lot of elbow work. You actually have to take and do a considerable amount of sanding. But this year I am going to both clear coat these compared to how I did not do that last year. So it'll look more like this finish here, which right now is slightly wet, just so that it shows through a little bit better. But I plan to clear coat and paint. Not paint everything, but I'm just gonna add some paint in ways to, give it some style, break it up, and do some things like that. That's the plan, at least. All of this depends on time. Right now, I just have the pieces taped together. Some clear Gorilla Tape is all that's holding them together. This will, of course, require a structure underneath of the body that's gonna hold everything together. That'll all have to be designed as well. Things that go on there, I'll probably use like a panel bond of some sort to hold the carbon parts to the structure that gets made underneath of it. Now, I didn't film removing these parts and then trimming them after they came out of the mold. And that's not a glamorous process whatsoever. In the end, what you're left with are these mangled bits. This was the hood mold, as you can see, and basically all you end up doing is heating it with a heat gun and then just pulling it away from the carbon part. They're sacrificial molds. I don't care at all. It's designed into it, but it's not a quick process. It's not anything like that. Is there ways to probably not have to do that? Yeah. Also, if you wanted to do a ton of mold prep and take every layer line out, that would absolutely help as well, and it would decrease time on the finished side also, but you're kind of just trading time, I feel like, at that point. I just mold it like it is, do the work to remove it. It doesn't take that long. I think the hood took me about 20 or 25 minutes to remove. And then you just go to work with your sanding, polish, blah, blah, blah. But that was what was left of my hood. The fender molds were also, mangled piles. Maybe one of the following ones, I'll do a time lapse of actually pulling that thing out of the mold, but you're not missing much. But after 2 weeks of work, we do have 2 body pieces, and it may not look like a lot, but again, I'm pretty happy with it. And by the next episode, my goal is to have the other fender definitely have started on doing the sides. Those are going to be large molds, long, large molds, that there's going to be a lot too. So that's going to be one that it takes a lot of print time and a lot of effort to get those completed. So let's hope that that goes well. Hopefully also I've started on a chassis. I would like to have this thing set up as a roller so I can start getting things like, the body placed on top of axles, start seeing how everything's gonna look and how it's all gonna, how it's all gonna really work together, because there's a lot of details to work out still. And I'm super excited to bring them all together. But that's gonna do it for this week. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this project. I'm looking forward to seeing it myself as it progresses. I'm pushing myself. It's not something that I feel super confident in yet. This could all go terribly, terribly wrong. And at the last minute, it could end up cutting up a RC four-wheel drive body to try and make a class 1 if this doesn't work, because you never know. So with that, as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already, hit the notification bell so you see the videos as soon as they get uploaded. Make sure and catch Matt's video next week, and wish us luck. We're gonna need it. Thanks again. We'll see you on the next one.